My name is Anthony Adenaike. I am a whistleblower and I will be exposing very serious acts of corruption, fraud and scam, collusion, fabrication of evidence, perversion of the cause of justice, discrimination, racism, and victimization, etc. by High Bailiff John Needham and others. This is the victim's witness statement of complaint regarding very serious misconduct and malfeasance in a public office by a very corrupt, dishonest, and racist High Bailiff John Needham. Here is the case number of a case about multiple breaches of the Isle of Man Data Protection Act. The presiding judge, as you can see, was High Bailiff John Needham. The defendant was the Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs, and the defendant's advocate was Mr. Thomas Newton from the law firm Appleby Isle of Man LLC. I filed a claim with the Isle of Man court on the 15th of October 2015. The claim form was duly and promptly served on the defendant by the Isle of Man coroner, Mrs. Sloan, on Thursday, the 28th of January 2016. According to the court rules, the defendant had 28 days from the date of service of the claim form to file either an admission or a defense, meaning that the defendant must file an admission or a defense on or by Thursday, the 25th of February 2016. The defendant defaulted by failing to file an admission or defense. As a consequence, on Monday, the 29th of February 2016, I made a request for judgment by default to the court. Exhibit 400. I was told that my request for judgment by default was not going to be processed by court staff. Mr. Rob Temple of the Isle of Man Court sent me an email telling me that my request for judgment was not going to be processed, even though there was nothing wrong. There was no valid reason for not processing my request for judgment. Exhibit 500. That email is Exhibit 500. On March the 3rd, 2016, the defendant knowingly filed a falsified application with the court. Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton from Appleby Isle of Man LLC presented fabricated and falsified articles of evidence to the court in a public capacity during the active course of a public trial. The defendant told many lies. For example, the defendant knowingly lied to the court about the date that the claim form was served on them by telling the court that the claimant served on the defendant a claim form issued on 18 January 2016 on Saturday, the 6th of February 2016. Without any doubt at all, this is total falsehood and fabricated lies, because the simple truth was that the Isle of Man coroner served the claim form on the defendant duly and promptly on Thursday, the 28th of January 2016, and not on Saturday, 6th of February 2016. On March the 7th, 2016, the court presided over by High Bailiff John Needham granted the defendant a prejudicial, discriminatory, fraudulent, flawed, defective, and collusive court order based on the prejudicial lies and fabrications by Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton from Appleby Isle of Man LLC. That discriminatory order is Exhibit 700. Very concerned and troubled, I contacted the Isle of Man coroner, and she confirmed that my claim form was served on the defendant duly and promptly on Thursday, the 28th of January 2016 by our office, contrary to the Saturday, 6th February 2016 false claim that defendant fabricated. This confirmation is Exhibit 800. Now, due to the fact that this prejudicial, discriminatory court order was now in effect, it meant that I had to pay additional court fees in order to file an application for a court order to challenge and stop the discriminatory and flawed court order that was fraudulently issued by High Bailiff John Needham of the Isle of Man Court in favor of the defendant. At this point, I'm going to point out this very important note. The application for a court order that I made to challenge and put a stop to the fraudulent and discriminatory court order issued in favor of the defendant by High Bailiff John Needham was never processed or granted. This application, as you will see later, is Exhibit 900. Now I'm going to, because of the time, I'm going to go to other very important notes to cut this session short. Another very important thing to note is that a scam was perpetrated against the victim by High Bailiff John Needham, Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton, and Mr. Rob Temple, all acting together in collusion and tandem. What they were doing is to issue false orders, orders that were discriminatory, orders that were flawed, in order that I may be required to pay more money into the coffers of the Isle of Man government. So what I'm saying here is that this was done to ensure that I paid unnecessary fees to the Isle of Man court or government. Consequentially, money was scammed from the victim for the benefit of the Isle of Man government coffers. I was swindled and manipulated financially, literally. Finance was deliberately used as a weapon of manipulation and discrimination. What I call WMD, weapon of manipulation and discrimination. Finance was being used, weaponized against a black and minority ethnic claimant of victim in order to exclude me from the process. This is against the law. This is systemic, well-organized racism and discrimination. I coined the word SWORD. Systemic, meaning systemic, well-organized racism and discrimination. I was WMD'd and I was sworded by High Bailiff John Needham, who is a public servant, Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton, and Mr. Rob Temple. Again, I'll point out another very important note. Let me just scroll there. Another thing I want to point out is very important. High Bailiff John Needham gave instruction to falsify court documents and to exclude and discriminate against the victim. High Bailiff John Needham instructed Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton to falsify court documents and Mr. Rob Temple to exclude and discriminate against me. Then High Bailiff John Needham took his criminal acts further by granting a prejudicial, discriminatory, fraudulent, flawed, defective, and collusive order against the victim for the unjust gain and benefit of the defendant. This is very serious misconduct and racially aggravated malfeasance in a public office. It is wrong, totally wrong. It is discriminatory, it is wrong. Again, I'll quickly cover item 14. High Bailiff John Needham's acts, practices, conduct, or behavior are indefensible and untenable. Malfeasance in law is the performance by a public official, High Bailiff John Needham in this case, of an act that is legally unjustified, harmful, or contrary to law, and or a wrongdoing. By reason of this discriminatory, racist, corrupt, dishonest, and fraudulent acts, practices, conduct, or behavior, I requested that High Bailiff John Needham recuse himself from the case and or other cases pertaining to myself. Bailiff Needham refused to recuse. Those documents I'll exhibit as Exhibit 1400. Just coming up next, I'll be presenting the material otherwise known as the physical or documentary evidence to corroborate the unlawful acts, practices, conduct, or behavior that I've stated in this witness statement. However, before I go to that part, I would quickly like to raise a number of points about Isle of Man sponsored institutional racism. The term institutional racism was coined and first used in 1967. Also, institutional racism was defined by Sir William Macpherson in the 1999 Lawrence Report as the collective failure of an organization to provide an appropriate and professional service to people because of their color, culture, or ethnic origin. It can be seen or detected in processes, attitudes, and behavior which amount to discrimination through unwitting prejudice, ignorance, thoughtlessness, and racist stereotyping which disadvantage minority ethnic people. The way I was treated, I paid for a service into the court, into the Isle of Man court. What I got was discrimination, exclusion, an attempt to make me to pay more unnecessarily into the coffers of the Isle of Man government. This is totally wrong, and this is what I'm raising in this evidence. This is what my complaint is about. Now, I shall go on to the material, or otherwise known as the physical or documentary evidence, in the next section. This is Exhibit 400, the request for judgment by default that I made and filed with the Isle of Man court presided over by High Bailiff John Needham. This document is a legal instrument that enables the Isle of Man court to order or issue judgment by default. I will scroll through this one-page document to show you the rest of the document. This is the date on which I filed the request for judgment by default. I will quickly note that this document, request for judgment by default, was supported, the application that I made was supported by other documents. For example, the Isle of Man coroner's certificate of service. This document was never processed, and a judgment by default was never granted either, even though there was nothing wrong with my application for request for judgment by default. This is Exhibit 500, the email that I received from Mr. Rob Temple telling me that my request for judgment was not going to be processed, even though there was nothing wrong with my request for judgment. As you can see, it says, therefore your request for judgment will not be processed. That email was sent by Mr. Rob Temple. Exhibit 500. This is Exhibit 700, the prejudicial, discriminatory, fraudulent, flawed, defective, and collusive court order that was granted and issued by High Bailiff Needham to the defendant although this prejudicial and discriminatory court order was based entirely on lies, fabrications, deception, and scam that were perpetrated against a black and minority ethnic victim. It is very important that I note here again that High Bailiff Needham instructed Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton from the law firm Appleby Isle of Man LLC to falsify court documents. This is very serious misconduct and racially aggravated malfeasance in a public office. This is a scandal on the part of High Bailiff Needham. His actions, his acts, and conduct are very discriminatory, prejudicial, racist. I would also like to point out that, let me scroll through this document so that you can see. As you can see, High Bailiff Needham issued this order. Also, another point I want to make is that costs, High Bailiff Needham fraudulently ordered that the victim pay the defendant's costs in the case. Also, this is an order that was issued by the Isle of Man High Court of Justice. So this is proof. This order did not come from me, it came from High Bailiff Needham, as you can see. Right there, before the eyes, before your eyes, the public's eyes. This order was made, you can see the note that High Bailiff Needham made. This order was made without a hearing. It was made in secret, right? This is very wrong. This is totally wrong. And I want the public to know how BAME people or persons are treated within the justice system. This is Exhibit 800, the email confirmation that was received by me from the coroner, Isle of Man coroner, Mrs. Sloan, confirming, as you can see, she stated, further to your 3 emails last night and this morning, I can confirm that your small claims forms were served on Thursday, the 28th of January 2016 by my lockman. Please note the date stamp here in this document here. This email was sent to me by the coroner further to and in response to previous emails that I sent to her asking her to confirm. One such email that I sent to the coroner starts from here. Please note again the date stamp of this email. The subject matter is about confirmation. At this paragraph, I noted that I, the claimant, believe that I am being unlawfully discriminated against unnecessarily by the Isle of Man courts. I'll return to the date stamp. The date stamp is important because on 7th of March 2016, High Bailiff Needham issued a fraudulent, discriminatory, and collusive order in favor of the defendant, knowing quite well that the coroner served, as she confirmed, that the coroner served the claim forms on the defendant on the 20th of January 2016 and not on Saturday the 6th of February 2016 as claimed by the defendant. Also, let me go to the coroner's certificate of service, which I sent to the court. together with my request for judgment by default. This is the certificate of service, Coroner Certificate of Service. This date is 28th of January 2016. This date is also the same day, 28th of January 2016, and the claim form was served by the coroner's lockman, a Mr. Peter Edward Nee. So it is clear that the claim form was served on 28th of January 2016. That was why the coroner confirmed. So the actions of High Bailiff Needham was deliberately and intentionally discriminatory against a BAME victim. I was deliberately discriminated against when there was no cause for me to be discriminated against in this manner. This action, or the act of High Bailiff Needham, is a scandal. I'm repeating again, it's a scandal. It is wrong. High Bailiff Needham brought the Isle of Man courts into disrepute. This is Exhibit 900, the victim's application for a court order to challenge and stop the prejudicial, discriminatory, fraudulent, flawed, and collusive court order that was granted in favor of the defendant by High Bailiff John Needham. I'm going to scroll through this application very slowly so that the audience can peruse at their own leisure the contents of this application. So I'll be scrolling now slowly. I'm scrolling through the whole order, so very slowly. Through the application very slowly. Here is the date that the application was made by me. And I want to draw attention to this address. You can see that it's an e-post box address, which is an electronic post office box address. What the Isle of Man public authorities did was to exclude me from filing, from starting any litigation against them, saying that I did not have an Isle of Man address. So they wanted to exclude me from starting any litigation on the Isle of Man. So I had to take out and pay for this service before I was allowed to start any litigation at all. So it is important. Please note this. That is one of the tricks that they use against BAME people in order to exclude them and to discriminate against them. Again, let me go to the top. I think this is the bottom. So I'll go to the top again and then quickly cover sections of this form, of this application. As you can see, the defendant here is the Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs. Now the description of order here, I made an application for an order or judgment to set aside a very discriminatory and unjust, flawed, defective, and collusive order or judgment entered against the claimant unfairly without a hearing on March 7, 2016 by High Bailiff John Needham. So, briefly, unlawful collusion and discrimination on the part of the court stroke bailiff John Needham and the defendants and their advocates against the claimant on the grounds of his ethnicity, race, color of skin, and or country of origin, etc. Number 2, deliberate fabrication of false statements in regards to when the claim form was served on the defendant by the coroner. Number 3, the court and or High Bailiff John Needham, in issuing the court order, validated, legalized, and supported the falsehood that was fabricated by the defendant's advocates. I'll cover another section. This is the evidence in support. This evidence I have already given in my victim statement, which you saw earlier. That's number 1. Again, it has to do with the saying on Thursday, 28th of January 2016, the coroner for Middle Shedding, Mrs. Sloan, duly and promptly served on the defendant a claim form with the particulars of the claim form on behalf of the defendant. So I won't cover all of this. The continuation sheet, this continues on continuation sheet 1 of 5. So I'll go to the next continuation sheet 1 of 5. So this is number 3, which I'll slowly scroll through this so that the audience can read and peruse the content of this application by themselves. Number 3, number 4, you can see here that I stated the Isle of Man Court stroke High Bailiff John Needham and the defendants and their advocates colluded and discriminated against the claimant unfairly on the grounds of his ethnicity, race, color of skin, and or country of origin. Again, that is continuation sheet 1 of 5. So I'll go to continuation sheet 2 of 5. That's number 5. Number 5. Again, there was a lot of bias, humongous bias, in the manner that this matter was dealt with. This is continuation sheet 2 of 5. I'll go to continuation sheet 3 of 5. Again, Number 6. There is a deliberate attempt by the defendant, the Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs, and the court to slow down this litigation, frustrate the claimant unfairly by granting biased, one-sided court orders, which should never have been issued in the first place, and also to cause the claimant to file appeal of court decisions, orders, etc. in a circular manner. There is no doubt that a lack of access to legal assistance, advice, representation, and finance is deliberately being used as a weapon of manipulation and discrimination, WMD, against a black and minority ethnic BAME claimant. That's number 6. Number 7. The order made and issued by High Bailiff John Needham, dated 7 March 2016, on behalf of the court, is totally flawed, defective, and biased, it being based on the deliberate fabrication by the defendant that the claim form was served on the defendant on Saturday, 6 February 2016. This order by High Bailiff John Needham on behalf of the court is contrary to and offends the fundamental principles of natural justice and a sense of fair play. Fair justice should be available to everyone, irrespective of gender, religion, beliefs, disability, sexuality, color, race, nationality, etc. The claimant was very clearly not offered fair justice by High Bailiff John Needham. Again, this is number 8. Number 9. Number 10. The claimant is being manipulated and used to make money for the courts, the Isle of Man government. This surely is plainly wrong and being used to make money for the Isle of Man government. I'll go to continuation sheet 4 or 5. I made some notes here in item 13, paragraph 13 of the application. The claimant notes with emphasis herein that the defendant, the Department of Home Affairs, Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs, the courts, the Isle of Man court, and so forth, are Isle of Man government bodies or public authorities. Therefore, the claimant is deliberately being manipulated and used to make money for the Isle of Man government. Because court fees, as you will see later, my checks were made payable to the Isle of Man government. Public authorities cannot act in an unlawful manner. There are laws that prevent public authorities, such as the Isle of Man Department of Home Office. Even the Isle of Man Court is a public authority. They cannot discriminate against you. There are race discrimination laws. There are European Convention, articles of the European Convention for Human Rights. B, here you can see the claimant notes with emphasis herein that this small claims procedure has not been and it's not being managed fairly, correctly, and professionally by the Isle of Man court. The claimant does not have a crystal ball. However, he believes very reasonably that the way this small claims procedure is being handled currently is most likely to lead to more legal grievances and wranglings down the line. It is being littered with legal shenanigans, mischievous or deceptive tricks on the part of the defendants and or the court, on the part of High Bailiff J.A. Needham. I'll go to continuation sheet 5 of 5, which is just the documentary evidence and in support of my application for a court order. As you can see, these are evidence that I presented. I would like to note that this application, the victim's application for a court order, was never processed or granted, even though a very prejudicial, discriminatory, fraudulent, flawed, and collusive court order, which was based entirely on lies, was granted to the defendant. The victim's application to challenge that order, that fraudulent order that was granted by High Bailiff J.A. Needham, the victim's application was never processed or granted. You can see how corrupt High Bailiff J.A. Needham is, how corrupt. He is a public official and is using a public office, the power of public office, to discriminate against a BAME person. This is totally wrong. And this is why I'm bringing this to the attention of the public. I'm making a public disclosure. Race equality laws are being broken. The public has to know this. So let me go to, you can see item 9, draft order by the claimant. Usually what they do during this litigation, they will ask you to draft an order. So I drafted an order. I'll go to that order. This is the order that I drafted. Again, I'm the claimant. This is the defendant. In the matter here, in the matter of the defendant's application, notice dated 3rd of March 2016, based entirely on falsehood, lies, deceit, unlawful, fraudulent acts and conduct, and duplicities. And in the matter of the claimant's application, notice dated March the 8th, 2016. So I wanted the court to grant me an order upon considering, I would say upon considering this day, the claimant's application notice. It is ordered that I believe J.A. Needham's unlawfully discriminatory and unjust, dishonest, perverse, plainly wrong in law, ethics and morals, flawed, defective, and collusive order or judgment dated 7th of March 2016 be set aside pronto, and the request for judgment by default made by the claimant be processed promptly, and I asked for the court to award me costs in the matter. This order, this application for an order was never granted. It was never processed. So as you can see, this is the order again, the draft order. Let me go to, after I made complaints about the acts, the conduct, the discriminatory acts, conduct, behavior, practices of High Bailiff John Needham, I was made to pay monies. As you can see, this is Isle of Man government is the payee here. This is the date of this check. This is the amount that I paid. I was being made, when it was clear that what they have done was wrong, I was still being made to pay. This is another check, £300 that I paid. This is £120. This is £300 that I paid, payments that I made to the Isle of Man government. You can see when it was clear that lies were being told, that the application of the defendant was based entirely on lies. What they were trying to do was to exclude me financially, make me to pay a lot of money into the coffers of the Isle of Man government to exclude me financially. They know that if they continue to make me to pay a lot of money into the coffers of the Isle of Man government, there might come a time when I won't be able to pay this money. This is a lot of money. Let me go again to another. This is an email that was received from Mr. Rob Temple, as you can see here. This is the header of the email. Obviously, it is from Rob Temple to myself. And here, it is very important. I want to draw attention to here. As you can see, the header of the email, which shows the date that the email was sent by Mr. Rob Temple. It was sent Tuesday, September the 13th, 2016 at 10:13 a.m. This is 6 months after the date of this application, the application for an order. You can see the date that I made application for this order. Yeah. So let me go back to, this is 6 months later. I was still being asked to pay into the coffers of the Isle of Man government when it was clear that there was a lot of discrimination going on. You can see this paragraph further to your email below and the letter attached thereto. His Worship the High Bailiff, that is High Bailiff John Needham, has directed that you should file a formal application together with the filing fee of £130. So I was being forced to pay more money into the coffers of the Isle of Man government. Yeah. And this is the check that the 130, this is the 130 they were asking from me. I paid the check. I paid with this check. That's the date of the check. That's the 130. Let me go back. I was made again to pay this, as I showed earlier on. This is 120, this is 300, and this is 130. This after I received this email. They refused to process my order, and they were asking me to pay into the coffers of the Isle of Man government. This is totally wrong. Now let me go to my victims, to the victims' statement, which you saw earlier. I want to quickly point out certain things. Like I said before, the victim's application for a court order to challenge and put a stop to the fraudulent and discriminatory court order issued in favor of the defendant by High Bailiff John Needham was never processed or granted. There was a scam was perpetrated against the victim by High Bailiff John Needham, Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton, and Mr. Rob Temple, all acting together in collusion and tandem. This was done to ensure that I paid unnecessary fees to the Isle of Man court or government. Consequentially, money was being scammed from the victim for the benefit of the Isle of Man government coffers. I was swindled and manipulated financially, literally. Finance was deliberately used as a weapon of manipulation and discrimination, WMD, against a black and minority ethnic BAME claimant or victim in order to exclude him. This is systemic, well-organized racism and discrimination. SORD. I use the term. I'll go to paragraph 13, item 13, and quickly point this out. It is manifestly based on this evidence, that cannot be denied. These documents are strong evidence, incontrovertible evidence. It is manifestly clear, self-evident, and there is no doubt at all that High Bailiff John A. Needham's acts, practices, conduct, or behavior in a public office setting were very prejudicial, biased, dishonest, fraudulent, improper, partial, and lacks integrity. By discriminating and colluding against the victim, validating lies in granting or by granting a very discriminatory and collusive order against the victim for the unjust gain and benefit of the defendant, I believe John A. Needham has without doubt broken his sworn oath of public office. I believe John A. Needham did not have to conduct himself in this prejudicial or biased, dishonest, and fraudulent manner. However, the fact is, he did. So, there it is. It is. Here is the evidence. Strong evidence. Strong evidence. This application was never granted. Why? One has to ask the question, why? So, that is that. This is Exhibit 1400, the victim's recusal application, requesting that High Bailiff John A. Needham take no further part in this case by virtue of his discriminatory, racist, corrupt, dishonest, deceptive, and fraudulent acts, practices, conduct, or behavior in a public capacity and in a public office. I'll go through this recusal request. As you can see, the request was dated April the 6th, 2016. It was sent to care of Mr. Rob Temple of the Isle of Man Courts. The subject matter is recusal of High Bailiff J.A. Needham. The first paragraph here, I, the claimant, hereby wish to request that, if I may, that High Bailiff J.A. Needham recuse and therefore take no further part in this claim. Here, second paragraph. Firstly, I refer in full to the application notice, evidence and witness statements filed with the court by the claimant dated March the 8th, 2016. I've already shown this as evidence, this application notice. Secondly, I refer to the Code of Conduct for members of the judiciary of the Isle of Man. This Code of Conduct is based on the 6 Bangalore Principles of Judicial Conduct. Fourthly, here, I wish to refer to the rule of law, as it is apparent to me that High Bailiff J.A. Needham is in violation of and or has disregarded the 4 universal principles and factor 7, amongst others, of the rule of law. So I'll scroll through this document. These are the reasons that I gave in support of my request asking High Bailiff Needham to recuse. Lack of integrity, honesty, moral and ethical principles on the part of High Bailiff J.A. Needham. Collusion, collusive and dishonest and corrupt practices on the part of High Bailiff J.A. Needham, as outlined in the evidence given in support of the claimant's challenge of a very discriminatory and unjust, judicially flawed, defective, and collusive court order or judgment entered against the claimant unfairly without a hearing on March the 7th, 2016 by High Bailiff J.A. Needham. Lack of integrity, discrimination, absence of impartiality on the part of High Bailiff J.A. Needham, and so forth. So let me scroll to the very top, and I'll scroll through the document again. April the 6th, 2016 is the date, and as you can see, I gave clear reasons which are supported by incontrovertible, irrefutable evidence, articles of evidence. I supported all these reasons: lack of integrity, collusion, with incontrovertible, irrefutable material evidence that cannot be denied. So you can see that. So this is this. Now let me go to the code of conduct, which I referred to here. The Isle of Man judiciary has a code of conduct. This is the code of conduct. As you can see, that's the code of conduct for members of the judiciary of the Isle of Man. Code of conduct for members of the judiciary of the Isle of Man. Introduction by His Honor the Deemster Doyle, Her Majesty's First Deemster and Clerk of the Rolls. Here, I'm going to point, this code of conduct is based on the 6 Bangalore Principles of Judicial Conduct, which are well recognized internationally and which are concerned with judicial independence, impartiality, integrity, propriety, equality of treatment, and competence and diligence. Let me go to another. This is very important, this paragraph. An important distinction must be drawn between a mistake by a judge, which could form part of an appeal, and a misconduct by a judge, which could form part of a complaint. What I'm complaining about is misconduct by High Bailiff John Needham. And it clearly states here, misconduct by a judge which could form part of a complaint. So I have a right to complain. If a party wishes to make this from here, if a party wishes to make a complaint about the personal conduct of a judge rather than a judge's judicial decision or case management, then such complaint may be made in writing to the Judicial Conduct Office. So, right there. So, there were complaints about the personal conduct of High Bailiff J.A. Needham. And I made the complaint, a number of complaints. I'll go to one of those complaints. I made a complaint on March the 21st, 2016. I made a complaint to my MP, Adam Holloway, Member of Parliament for Gravesham. And this complaint dated March the 21st, 2016 is based on the victim's witness statement and evidence that I've given and that I've been covering throughout this video. Let me scroll through to I asked my MP to make representations on my behalf and raise these serious issues with the Queen's personal representative on the Isle of Man, the Lieutenant Governor. Again, this is the complaint that I made. Yeah. Serious issues that I'm asking that representations be made about: unlawful discrimination and collusion on the part of the Isle of Man Court, stroke High Bailiff J.A. Needham and the defendant, the Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs, against the claimant on the grounds of his ethnicity, etc. Following the filing of an Isle of Man case pertaining to the Isle of Man Data Protection Act breaches by the Isle of Man Department of Home Affairs. Again, I just went through, I've already gone through this, so I won't go through it again. I paid the and so forth. Yeah. That's the complaint I made to my MP, who made representations on my behalf. I covered the lies that were told, how I was discriminated against, how a discriminatory, flawed, defective, collusive order was issued against me and was now in effect. The fact that the request for judgment that I made was not processed. I'll go to another complaint which I made to the Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor is the Queen's representative on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is a crown dependency. On March the 22nd, on March the 22nd, 2016, a day after I made a complaint to my MP, I also made a complaint to the Lieutenant Governor. That's the email, that's the address. I complained again. It was the same complaint, the very same complaint that I made it. It's about unlawful discrimination by High Bailiff J.A. Needham, as you can see. Again, this is the background. I gave the background. So it's very similar to the complaint that I made to my MP. It's basically the same complaint to the Lieutenant Governor, the Queen's representative on the Isle of Man. The WMD, where money was being scammed from me. So, as you can see, it is very clear, this evidence is very clear that I did complain to the Lieutenant Governor. Why am I complaining? Because there was discrimination against me, serious discrimination. Even though I complained, this letter of complaint to the Lieutenant Governor was ignored. This letter of complaint to my MP was taken up by my MP, who made representation on my behalf. This is the letter of complaint to my MP. Let me scroll to the top. This is the letter of complaint to my MP dated March the 21st, 2016. And this is the letter of complaint to the Lieutenant Governor dated March the 22nd, 2016. It was ignored. This is the recusal request that I made on April the 6th, 2016, asking High Bailiff John J.A. Needham to recuse. He refused. As I stated in my evidence before, I requested. I believe John A. Needham's acts, practices, conduct, or behavior are indefensible and untenable. I requested that I believe John A. Needham recuse himself from the case. Bailiff Needham refused to recuse, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of the lies, the corruption, the discrimination that were perpetrated against me, in spite of the fact that he instructed. I believe John A. Needham gave the instruction to falsify court documents and to exclude and discriminate against me. I believe John A. Needham instructed Mr. Andrew Thomas Newton to falsify court documents and Mr. Rob Temple to exclude and discriminate against the victim. This is serious misconduct and racially aggravated malfeasance in a public office. In spite of this clear evidence, I believe John A. Needham refused to recuse. After the victim made complaints about very serious misconduct by High Bailiff John Needham at a subsequent appeal, the victim's complaints were covered up, unlawfully excluded, and the victim was defamed and victimized by Deemster Andrew Collett and Judge of Appeal Jeremy Story for making valid complaints against High Bailiff John Needham, who is their colleague. Here is the physical or documentary evidence to corroborate unlawful acts of victimization against me. This document is a court order that was issued against me by Deemster Andrew Collett and Judge of Appeal Jeremy Story. Here it says, in the matter of the appeal of the appellant against the orders of His Worship the High Bailiff. The High Bailiff that is being referred to is High Bailiff John Needham. It says in the matter of costs applications. So this order was about, or is about, cost applications. These are the judges who presided over the appeal. As you can see here in paragraph 1, it was ordered that I pay a sum of 7,000. In paragraph 2 here, it was ordered that I pay another sum of 9,000. Let me scroll through the rest of the order. This is the rest of the order. So it was ordered that I pay a total of £16,000 for complaining, for making very valid complaints that were corroborated and backed with evidence, incontrovertible evidence of discrimination, of scam that were perpetrated against me. At this point, I would like to draw an analogy. After the abolition of slavery, as you would remember, it was the perpetrators of slavery who were compensated for enslaving people. In the same vein here, it is the people who have done wrong against me who have been compensated for doing wrong, for perpetrating wrong against me, scam, discrimination, unlawful acts of discrimination, trial fixing, falsification of evidence. It is without doubt that the acts of these judges are perverse, plainly wrong, dishonest, corrupt, discriminatory, and racist. It is a breach of race discrimination laws and my human right. In spite of the fact that I made a number of very serious complaints against High Bailiff John Needham, complaints which include but are not limited to misconduct in a public office, abuse of a public office, corruption in a public office, trial fixing, fraudulent acts in a public office, attempts to pervert the cause of justice, discrimination and racism. High Bailiff Needham was rewarded with promotion. Here is a new story. As you can see, High Bailiff to be Ireland's third most senior judge. He was promoted to become the Isle of Man's third most senior judge. Here is High Bailiff John Needham. I'll go through some of this news report. As you can see here, the appointment is made by the Queen based on a recommendation made by a local selection panel. In spite of these serious complaints that have been made against High Bailiff Needham, he was still recommended to the Queen. So they are deceiving, they deceived the Queen. That is wrong. That is wrong. Here the Lieutenant Governor, who I complained to, said the High Bailiff is well respected. He is not well respected. The complaints that I made are valid. They have refused to investigate the complaints. I have been discriminated against, and I continue to be discriminated against. That is why I'm making a public disclosure in regards to these complaints. Here says a government spokesman said the Isle of Man prides itself on its values of democracy, good government, and importance of the rule of law. No, that is false. There is nothing like the rule of law. Again, let me go to, I will also go to another news article. This has to do with Deemster Andrew Collett, who was sworn in as the first Deemster of the Isle of Man. This is Deemster Andrew Collett, and this is the Lieutenant Governor. As you can see here, the first Deemster is President of the High Court of the Isle of Man, a position made by the Queen on the recommendation of the Queen, of a selection panel. Again, the Queen was deceived. Mr. Collett says here, the administration of justice is as important to society as health and education. Of course, it is, I agree. And I look forward to helping shape the future of our justice system. The problem is that there is no administration of justice. There is racism and discrimination. I will go to another. I'll go to the appointment of another very corrupt public servant, public official, Judge of Appeal Jeremy Story. He is being paid this huge salary. He is a racist. He discriminates against people. He is corrupt, as you can see. As I've shown, I'll be putting forward more, I'll be making more public disclosures of his corruption, of the corruption of this public servant. Here it says it was additional responsibilities include promoting confidence in the island and its judiciary locally and internationally. And these people, they are very corrupt. There it is. These people, they are corrupt. I know there is going to be consequences against me, but if there is corruption, it has to be exposed. It has to be exposed. This person, High Bailiff John Needham, is totally corrupt, racist, and he was promoted. Totally wrong, totally perverse. Totally perverse. Here, let me go to a document. Here is a complaint that I made to the Isle of Man police about High Bailiff, the conduct or the misconduct of High Bailiff John Needham. Here is a response from Inspector Paul Bryan. Inspector Paul Bryan, following my email, an email that I sent complaining about misconduct in a public office. What they have done is to refuse to investigate the complaints that I've made. If you look at this paragraph, he said to do this, you have to present evidence to the police in England to show what crime you are reporting and then make a formal statement, a formal statement or complaint to that effect. As you believe any crimes may or are being committed in the Isle of Man, the police in England would, if they saw fit, send the statement of evidence to the Isle of Man police for it to be assessed here. I've communicated with the police here, and they said to me that since the crimes were committed in the Isle of Man by public servants on the Isle of Man, it has to be investigated on the Isle of Man. So basically what the Isle of Man police has done to me, what this inspector has done, is to give me a runaround. So let me show you the email that I sent to the email that I sent to the Isle of Man police starts from here. It starts from here. This is my email to the chief constable of police. The subject matter was to report criminal offenses to the Isle of Man police. These are a number of offenses that I was reporting to the Isle of Man police, and I have named Bailiff Needham here, Mr. Rob Temple, and others. That's the email. That's the end of the email. So nothing has been done, nothing was done about the complaint. I have also complained to the Isle of Man Lieutenant Governor, the Queen representative on the Isle of Man, but nothing has been done about this matter. It has not been investigated by the police. The police has, by law, the police has a duty to investigate. When somebody reports crime to them, they have a duty to investigate, but they have refused to investigate. I'll be sharing more about how I have been treated by the police. What they have done is to protect, because they wanted to promote High Bailiff John Needham. In spite of his crimes, they have refused to investigate my complaints against him. They have refused to investigate or prosecute my complaints against him. I note here a former Mr. Harding, a former attorney, Manx Attorney General, Isle of Man Attorney General, who was prosecuted for corruption or something like that. I can't recollect what he was prosecuted for. So that is why I made a complaint to the Isle of Man police, but they refused to even entertain my request at reporting crimes to them.